nutrition.
Clinical nutrition?
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah. So,
and you just got your master's in that?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do with this extraordinary knowledge?
Well, actually, I'm counseling people with chronic conditions or diabetes, pre-chronic conditions, and how to use food and diet and supplements instead of medication, basically.
And part of what this medical professional, this clinical health professional told me yesterday, mental health professional told me yesterday, was that the diet that the doctors are prescribing is typically in direct contrast to what the people actually should be putting into their bodies to cure things like diabetes. And the whole thing is to make them sick and make them sicker, so they'll buy the pharmaceutical drugs that are prescribed to control the various diseases that the doctors themselves are perpetuating.
Yeah. I wouldn't be that, what's the word? I wouldn't imagine there's that much thought goes into it, but I definitely agree that the diet, as recommended by the government, is influenced a lot by large food groups, by large food industry, and that they probably recommend the carbohydrates at the bottom is way too high compared to the proteins they put at the top, and they put fats as tiny, whereas there's a lot of very good fats that have been known to help your brain health.
Yes.
So really, it should be a bit more straight than more like a triangle. I think, and also they put milk on every single recommendation, and milk's actually been shown to be a bit more inflammatory than people realize. And most of these diseases are based on inflammation.
Also there has been some concern about soya products.
Yeah, because 90% of the soy in this country is produced using genetically modified organisms, and those need to be sprayed as part of the process for using the GMO, is that they're highly sprayed with herbicides because they're resistant to the herbicides.
Right.
So that's how they're grown. Instead of tilling the soil and in between crops, they just keep planting them and then just spray them after they plant them and keep spraying them after they plant them. Yes. So you're exposed to a little bit more.
Now the GMO foods themselves is brought up as why are we even doing that? I mean, what's your feeling on GMO foods? Do you think?
I understand the theory behind it. And the theory was to produce grains of, say, rice that were more resistant to conditions that were causing them to die in third world countries. But the reality is, if you take the big picture as a whole, the fact that we're so focused on meat in our diet, and so much of our entire process is towards growing cows and pigs, that the food we have to grow to feed those animals would have fed the third world countries twice over. And if we were instead ourselves eating more plant-based food, we wouldn't have. Are you a vegan or vegetarian? I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, but I believe that
moderation would be the.
Yeah, I think we eat too much meat. I mean, we probably normally.
So, what would be, in your professional opinion, a good breakfast?
A good breakfast? Well, it's funny. It's not. I'm okay with doing eggs 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm okay with, I do cereal, but I mix it in with lots of nuts and seeds.
Yes.
And because then you get all your protein. And I also believe in putting as many vegetables and fruits, so I recommend smoothies to people and literally throwing in the green leafy vegetables, because they've got lots of calcium. If you're not taking milk, they've got lots of calcium. They also help you to absorb all the other vitamins and nutrients. Vegetables have got all the vitamins and minerals we need, and if you want to get the extra protein, you can use legumes and beans. So the bean diet here, I think, is interesting. People are into rice and beans here a lot. I always find when I go to different cultural areas that they always have their own way of dealing with one thing they eat too much of or not enough of. So I think the fact that here people balance out all the sausages with all the rice and beans is kind of a good thing.
Yeah, I just watched fortuitously a documentary on the ancient cultures here in Central Americas, as opposed to Europe, and how indeed the European diet was had a lot of animal, the pigs, the cows, and that there was essentially none of that over here in the Americas at all, and how the of course, maize was cultivated from a weed in Mexico, and they've hybrided it into now, and how the cultures back then actually controlled the landscape or the vegetation by giving burnouts. They found out that if they burn the land, the grass would grow back greener, and then that attracted the buffalo, which has allowed them to go ahead and then get meat into, more antelope and stuff like that would come down into the Americas. And how the different blends of the nutritions have led us to today with the diets that we have. What play? I mean, because I think, to me, I'm a conspiracy theorist that I am. I always, there's a lot of things they put into the processed foods now that I don't think are very good for us. No. Would you say that's true?
Oh, no, actually, I agree with you. I mean, I stopped, once I started, studying, I stopped completely eating processed meat.
Mm-hmm.
I think a really good rule of thumb is the closer it is to the earth, the better it is for you.
Yeah.
The closer it came from just having been grown. Even if it's an animal. I mean, chickens.
Yeah.
But
I'm finding more and more people like doing home gardens and having chickens since they've been in my neighborhood here in the city. You can hear roosters almost every morning.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of cute.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, like I said, I'm not a vegan. My daughter is a diehard vegan. And she keeps sending me all this stuff. And it's more from the morality perspective, from her perspective. And I know that the food industry here is not moral on any level. I mean, it's bad for the growers, it's bad for the consumers, it's bad for the animals. Because the growers, they've often been, gone broke, gone bankrupt. Because, like you're a Purdue grower, you have to pay upwards of $1 million. You're indebted for life. You have a mortgage to get your house.
Right.
And then you have to do things the way they tell you.
Right.
And if you don't have a certain percentage turnaround, then they give you the weaker chickens. It's like you get punished. And they need to grow the chickens as big as they can. If they grow them really big, then they can't walk. So the chickens spend their lives lying on their bellies because they're too heavy to walk. So that when you get the real big plump ones, I mean...
You've, I'm sure, watched some of the documentaries like Food Inc. and all the rest.
Yeah, so, that part makes me feel good.
Are they pretty much accurate in their descriptions of what they're saying?
Yeah, and they are. And there's a kind of a movement, it's funny, I call it a libertarian movement of food growers who want to be independent of the government. Yeah. And they want to not have the government say you can't sell the food unless we've okayed it, because the government is kind of in cahoots with the big growers. So if you've been a conspiracy theorist, I mean, to that extent, there are large groups of people who... If
I'm correct, isn't there just 4 major food suppliers now? Is that true?
Well, I mean, I can't remember the name. I know there's a ConAgra. I can't remember the others. I know ConAgra is the biggest one, and there is about 4. Yeah. But
they control like 90% of our food production or something like that.
Yeah. So like the people who want to do the independent thing, like this is a guy, I can't remember where he is now. He's really, really outspoken. I just can't remember his name, but he's a farmer, and he's with this, they call it there's a sustainability movement among farmers, young, small farmers, usually young.
Yeah, they're the ones getting hammered from it.
And they're trying to build up a thing where it's like cooperative neighborhood farming, where you come to my farm.
Yes.
I cut my chicken's head off here and I give you the chicken.
Yeah, and just sort of like it's kind of like a barter. And, then there's this great urban gardenist who started in L.A. just by putting some vegetables out. You know about him, I think.
Well, they have them in Manhattan, too. They call them, I think they use tower gardens.
Yes.
They grow them in...
the urban gardenist revolution that's happening now. So all this is very good, but there's always also concern about the soil depletion that has happened because of big ag. And it seems like we're repeating almost the same things we went through back in the Dust Bowl area. Do you see that, where we're kind of like overusing? We're not allowing.
If you're overusing those herbicides, you're killing off all the other organisms that are designed to, refurbish the soil with whatever.
Yeah, we even came up with a documentary on the cultural. I saw that even the ancient Indians, I think it was every 3rd year, they would just let they wouldn't grow anything. Yeah. They just let the soil
fallow.
Go back.
that was an old style of farming. I mean, my dad had a market gardening business. I lived in Ireland, and everyone did that. Everyone had the field that they grew wheat in for a year, and you didn't make much money off it, but that's what you did that year. And then the next year you put your vegetables back in, or you alternate the vegetables, because some vegetables are what they call nitrogen fixing. So they take nitrogen out of the air and they put it into the soil.
Yeah.
And then when the next group of plants that you use the next year, they'll have the nitrogen as a source of nutrients. So the plants actually are designed, the Indians used to do that. They used to know which ones to grow together. They complement each other, when they'd have their little sister plants that they always planted together, like the squash and the corn or whatever. And I mean, there was some logic behind that thinking. So,
well, we are what we eat, aren't we? It's not just a cliche. It's actually true, isn't it? We do.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with the Food Babe? Have you ever heard of her?
No.
Oh, look her up.
Yeah.
This woman is fantastic. She actually, just in one of her posts, made Subway take out all the silicone they were having in their buns.
Oh, yeah?
She stopped Anheuser-Busch in their tracks by asking for the ingredients.
Oh, good.
Yeah. She's got a great following. I mean, she has, obviously, in order to be able to, make Anheuser-Busch and, food producers to stop in their tracks and change their menu overnight. Yeah, the Food Babe, I think you'd be, happy to see what she's doing, because a lot of what she expounds, I believe, is right in line with what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's very good.
This is really, I love this. I choose freedom. Oh my God, that's really funny.
I got that from, I was on my way to down here, and it's graffiti. It was on the side of a wall.
Seriously?
Yeah. I choose freedom. I says, well, I got to use that.
Oh my God, that is really good. I love it.
Thank you. I actually have a GMO poster on the back there, and a bumper sticker also.
On the back of the side?
Yeah. Go take a look. It's GMO posters right there. And what are you doing in town? Just
my husband had a conference, and I said I'm going to come join you for a couple of days. So we did a few days together.
Wonderful. And what is your husband on the conference for?
It's a healthcare insurance and electronic medical records management conference. Yeah. So how to get all the different doctors and insurance companies to talk to each other.
And that sounds like a good thing.
It's complicated, I guess. It's huge. I mean, they took over the entire conference.
Does this have anything to do with the setup of the new healthcare system?
He was very involved in that for 2 years, and then they implemented it, the Obamacare, and now...
How did he feel about Obamacare?
Well, it got more people insured. He actually works for a huge insurance company, and I mean, from a business perspective, they were very picky about which states they went into, because if the governor in that state wasn't supporting it financially, then they didn't go into that state. They made a business decision against going into that state. The places where it got supported, they went in. So it was kind of like an everyone waiting to see what everyone else is going to do type scenario. So they went into about 10 states, and it worked well. And
it worked well for whom?
Well, it worked well for getting more people insured.
Yeah, but it's insurance, health care.
Yes, of course, that's the huge argument that everyone will make, this country versus any other country. Right now, we don't have anything else. I mean, right now, our cost of health care is
most of the, healthcare professionals I've spoken to out here...
It's high because of insurance, yes.
Are very much, they were very much overwhelmingly, at least the ones I've talked to. They were adamantly against Obamacare and how it infringed upon their ability to actually provide health care.
Yeah, if you're a small business owner, and it's not even a small business owner. I mean, I actually was surprised to find this out from my husband, because I always assumed the opposite. But even if you're a large business and you use an insurance company to insure your people, isn't the insurance company that pays out?
Well, and as contrast, the only people I found out here that were in favor of Obamacare with the health insurance companies. I actually had one woman out here that just laughed. She says, I told me, she was very candid to me. She goes, the only ones who are benefiting from Obamacare are us. We're making money hand over fist because it was becoming a mandatory thing.
Yeah,
but what I overwhelmingly...
They didn't have to go into those states, though. Like, my husband's company was able to make a profit, yes, but only because, see, they weren't being forced to go into every state. They could pick and choose which states they went into. So they went into the states where it was being supported financially. So if you were in a state where it wasn't being supported financially, then most of the insurance companies stayed out, which meant there wasn't much competition.
Well, again, so that's what I said. The winning factor on this, or the people that said that what would fix it, is competition.
So the thing that would have made the competition happen would be if there had been more of a federal mandate for people to support it financially. Like, say a state like Alabama, you know, the governor or whoever decided we're not going to support it. We have an option to support it or not. We won't give federal funds to it. We won't give state funds to it. So then you might get one out of the 5 major insurance companies who went into Alabama then, because they said, well, it's not being supported. We're not going to even try to compete because it won't be competitive. You know, it won't work for us because people won't sign up because it's not being supported. So it's going to be too expensive for them. So those states got left in the dust. Whereas the states like Connecticut, like where we're from, we have 5 different insurance companies who'll cover you who will got into that market, so the prices came down because the state was supporting it. You know, so that, I mean that, and then now the government's not even really supporting it, so it's getting even more expensive. But because it's kind of like a catch-22, they're like, they don't want to support it because they don't want it to work, but then by not supporting it, they're almost helping it to fail. You know, because the whole thing is based on there being a government subsidizing of the people who. Yeah,
but I think she's.
Yeah, I know you don't like government.
It just.
But if you don't have anything else, then what happens is those people
it just smacks to me again, because I go back into the eugenics program. Anything that I believe is being run by the government right now goes back to the eugenics program is going. But here's the point of the fact, and this is cold hard, just scary truth. Because of AI and robotics, we're looking at about 50% of the worker bees here are going to be out of a job in about 10 years. There's going to be a mass amount of people with nothing to do, and we don't have the ones that are left working or are not going to be able to support the welfare system that would take. There's going to be a massive amount of people unemployed.
Yeah.
And with the immigration programs allowing other unskilled workers to come in to our already burgeoning unemployment problem, I mean, it's going to, unless we get a handle on the robotics and the AI intelligence, we're heading for a massive train wreck that is inevitable. And there's no way we can subsidize our way out of this. There's no way the government's going to be able to provide for all of these, what Kissinger essentially called us, useless food eaters. People do not produce as much as it costs to keep them alive, which is, you know, we counts for a lot of people these days.
Yeah, but you know, it's funny. I remember a French teacher saying that to me. I had an essay to write when I went to school in, you know, late 1970s in high school. And I remember a French teacher giving me an essay that was that exact same title. Like, it was kind of based, by the time we are in our midlives, people will not be working anymore because of all those reasons. And it was because computers were coming out. And I look at my husband and I'm like, he's working more now. He's in that field. He's in not artificial intelligence, but he's in IT. And he never stops working. His computer has just connected him to everything more often. He's on every time zone in every place. He's like, you know, there's no off time, there's no off button, there's no clocking out anymore. You get the same salary, but you work 1.5 times.
Indeed, until the point comes where I talked to another professional who was into AI, robotic. scientist, and he was actually, it was one of these, he was a classic example. I guess if you ever read Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, where a scientist is so singular that they do not see the repercussions of actually what they're inventing. That they're, and this guy was saying, we brought up I says, aren't you basically making things, inventing things that are going to eventually kill you?
Yeah.
And he's,
Well, that's the fame. It's funny. I didn't know this myself until recently, but I was reading about the German scientist. He was working on what he thought was going to be a fertilizer, but it, in the end, turned out to be the gas they used in the chambers. And he was Jewish, and him and his wife both committed suicide. They never saw it. They could have seen it coming, but they didn't. It was like one little step more, and. So yes, I agree. I think even talking about the medical industry, they're too focused on individual. Like, you have this. You go to my son had an arrhythmia, and you go to a cardiologist, and then you go to an electrophysiologist. But no one asks you, have you had any blood work done? Or what's the rest of your body like? You get so pinpointed by each individual different doctor. I think that makes the healthcare industry way more expensive. You don't have one person who looks at your whole body. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but the one thing we have to do in a nutritional analysis is do a head to toe.
Yes.
All the different physical symptoms, the different appearance, all the different parts of your body, your entire history. And when you look at the whole person, sometimes things fit together more easily. I have so many women come to me, and they're already on anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants. Yeah. I mean, it's like 80% of the people who come to me are on a medication and they're less than 50 years old. Yeah. And often, one of the things we do is, and I cannot use insurance for this because it's not a recognized field, I guess. I mean, if I work with a doctor, if I have a doctor write a prescription for testing that I can do for people, metabolic testing, that test will cost $200. If I write the prescription, it'll cost $800.
Wow.
And it's just because of who wrote the prescription for the same test, even though I'm the one interpreting the data in both cases.
Wow.
So there's something screwy about our system.
Yeah. I would say. If you could fix it, what would you do? If you could, if as you're a healthcare professional, nutritionist, what would you do?
I think I do what my husband kind of suggests, which is do a fee for service. So doctors get paid for their performance, as opposed to, and they're trying to switch it around, as opposed to the number of hours they've spent seeing patients. So they don't, or the number of patients they've seen. Sorry, now it's the number of patients you go through. So you get 15 minutes per patient. But if you were paid based on your results, they're trying to change it. Some of the insurance companies are incorporating that into their thing, where they'll look at the results from each patient. This person came to you with diabetes. What did you do? The only problem is they're too medication-oriented right now. If they could include more holistic approaches and not have, did you put them on medicine, be one of the criteria for a good result, If they could just change, if they could change the thinking. But the approach of saying, how well are you treating your patients as opposed to how many are you whipping through?
Now, you just brought up something else that is a concern.
Yeah.
The number of holistic doctors that have met mysterious deaths.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not familiar with this?
I think I've read about it. Which kind of holistic doctors?
Ones that are promoting prevention as opposed to, treatment.
Wow, I haven't actually heard of that.
Yeah, an extraordinary high percentage. And I think the last time I checked on this, and this might have been 8 months ago, there was something like 246 doctors that have died mysteriously. All holistic doctors, a lot of them very outspoken, famous people, who have died mysterious deaths. And the suspicions I've gotten from several other professionals, is that they're trying to indeed eliminate that whole philosophy of healthcare. They are trying to ward people off. They're trying to drive people in to the treatment side.
Oh yeah, it's like I just had surgery and they put in like a filler for my natural bone to grow in. And I said to my doctor, so should I take more vitamin D and calcium? Should I take the supplements that help your bones grow? And she said, she kind of was very stoic. She goes, there's no evidence to show that supplementing with vitamin D helps in any way. And then I realized my mom, who was diagnosed with osteoporosis and put on a medication, which I'm not sure how this medication is supposed to work, but I know one of the side effects, it's had huge side effects.
Yes.
And she's had to quit taking it. My aunt died, very short after she started taking it. And one of the things it does is it depletes your vitamin D. But the other thing is, when a doctor tells you to go take vitamin D, they don't give you a prescription for it. They don't tell you where to get it. Most people go to CVS or GNC. And there's because there's no legislation in this country that controls the quality of supplements, because they're not recognized, then there's a huge variety of things that do or don't work, or are or are not absorbed easily when you eat them. And some of them could be
a lot of fillers, phoniness put in.
Or I used to work in pharmaceutics. You have to design things so that your body can absorb them and that they're not broken down before they get to where they need to go. So they have to be,
and each person, of course, reacts differently to. And so that's why they say, let me know how this feels, so they can either up the dosage or down the dosage.
So with a vitamin D, it does help bone growth, but it has to be taken with other vitamins that help your body to assimilate it, like vitamin K.
Herbal supplements, are you big on herbal supplements? And
I was going to say, in Europe, where this is legislated and prescribed, and you go to a pharmacy to get that stuff. They have what they call a commissioning monograph, and it's 400 herbs that have met the criteria for clinical testing for use in certain areas, like wormwood is used for parasites.
Right.
And I love looking at some of the witch places around here because they always have a herbal book. And I'll say to Patrick, well, they got the right herbs. They're selling them for weird reasons, but they actually are, I looked up wormwood to see what they said about it. They said banishes the evil. Well, it gets rid of parasites, but they don't actually.
Yeah, they put it in different herbs.
So I thought it was it's funny. I said everything has 10% or 20% truth in it. And it's interesting that they also it's like they've almost adjusted their little witch books down to what is actually acceptable in Europe, which would be something you get in your pharmacy,
Well, indeed. Again, that's part of the argument. It's like you can grow things in your garden. You can find weeds on the side of the street that have herbal.
Oh, that's what I was saying also about the chicken thing. There's a weed. There's 3 or 4 different weeds that chickens eat naturally if they're exposed to wild flora. And these are things that actually do kill pesticides that chickens have. So if you let them run wild,
it's all in nature, isn't it? It's already all there. We just have to find out what it is and apply it.
And we've had it in our history.
Oh yeah, sure.
The Indians have had it.
Yes.
The witch, whatever you call them, wherever they got that from, it's probably ancient European or something. Knowledge that they had, and they
just had to find a way to bottle it and then sell it to us, huh?
And I even have my own theory on, way back in the 1700s when we had the witch trials. There were herbs that were used at the time. I forget the exact word. Emmenagogues. They cause women to have their period and cause blood to flow, but they'd have the same effect of basically, if you were pregnant, that would kind of almost end the pregnancy.
Yeah.
And they were banned, and the women who recommended them to other women were kind of held up as being witches.
Indeed.
And
today they just prosecute them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was this one man, a rather famous case, and he was in Canada. And he was making a cannabis oil. The guy didn't even smoke pot. He just was looking for cures for things. And he made this cannabis elixir oil that was curing 4-stage cancer at a 90%.
I've actually been to conferences. It's funny, a gastroenterologist conference, and they had a woman sitting beside me who was well known among their group of doctors as a herbalist. And she told me that in Maine they had so much weed that she used to get them to give her all the excess leaves, and she would juice the leaves for that reason. And she'd give them to cancer patients.
Yeah, and they arrested this guy for cultivation, put him in prison.
I guess he was in the wrong state. Because if he was in Maine, they would have had no problem.
It was in Canada.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, the Canadian government charged him with cultivation of pot, arrested him, threw him in prison because he was curing cancer.
Oh, he should have gone across the border because apparently it's all over the place in Maine.
And he wasn't even selling the stuff. He was giving the stuff away to cancer patients. He wasn't even selling it.
It's definitely... I have this conversation all the time with a kid. I'm friends with, I coffee with him on a regular basis. He's about 30. Well, I call him a kid. He's 34. To me, he's a kid.
You're a kid.
Yeah. But he has leukemia for the second time running. He had it once. He tried to fight it through the VA because he's a vet. And he didn't. Now this time he's gone back to Smilo, which is Yale. And he said they're doing a better job. It's the second time round. But he knows he got it from the burn pits in Afghanistan. Because he said they burned everything. They burned Humvees. And they burned them in the sites that they took over from Saddam Hussein, which they actually suspect now might have really had some sort of chemical weapons.
Oh, yeah.
So when they were burning all this stuff...
Well, they were old and stuff, but they were there.
So he said there's like thousands of vets who've got this rare cancer. Yeah. And the government won't admit that there's any connection. And he can't get any kind of... whatever, compensation. And he can't work. They won't take him back because, now he's had cancer twice.
Hopefully some of that is being taken care of now.
But his doctor told him that he couldn't... I was talking to him in general about, to other people, not to him. I didn't want to advise him, in a coffee shop. But he was listening to what I was saying. I was talking about using B12 to help cell regeneration and blood regeneration. And he went off and took it by himself without telling me. And then he came back, he said, I felt amazing. I was taking B12 for a week. And I said, okay, not recommended when you're in the middle of chemo, because they fight against each other. And, because chemo is trying to kill cells.
Yeah.
And when you use a regeneration therapy, like what cannabis does...
It'll kill it right off.
Yeah. They're fighting against each other. Right. You're trying to kill cells, now you're trying to rebuild cells all at the same time. So you wait until the therapy's done, and then you take it, and it helps post-cancer treatment patients. But you've got to do one or the other. Like, you really can't do
Now, there have been also studies that say that certain seaweeds are curing and preventing cancer.
Well, here's what I always come back to. It's good to analyze the person's complete metabolism and see what they're deficient in. And most doctors don't do that. But, a good nutritionist will.
Now, do you have to go to a nutritionist, professional nutritionist to get what you would
they call it functional. Anyone who does what they call functional medicine, who's been trained in functional medicine.
Okay.
And it can be a doctor, it can be a naturopath, it can be a nutritionist. But what they'll do is they'll do the complete... This started with a guy in Texas. He started a lab called Metagenics. And he was a professor at the University of Texas. And years ago, they made all these connections between certain things that people were deficient in if they had certain chronic conditions, or if they were on certain medications that cause deficiencies in these other nutrients. Like if you're on a lipid-lowering medication, a statin, it causes a complete deficiency in coenzyme Q10, which is an important enzyme in energy production in your cells. And people who have side effects from statins, really, if they just take this supplement, they're usually fine, Otherwise, they start having these other energy problems and shaking problems. I had one guy who almost looked like he had Parkinson's. He was so bad, especially older people. And, then he started taking the supplement.
Is there any... I happen to live with a person that is suffering from diabetes. Is there anything that you would recommend for a diabetic?
Very heavy on green vegetables and vegetables in general. Yeah. And omega-3s supplement help to... They tend to increase insulin sensitivity. Betaine, it's a... I'm not sure how to describe it. I use betaine... let me just try to get this right again. It also depends on what else they have going on. I would recommend definitely omega-3s and a very high on green vegetables. And
I know they watch their diet quite closely.
The thing is, people think that they're told not to take sugar, but they don't think about the carbohydrates and the easily produced sugars that come from all sorts of white flours, grains, pasta, because they're all basically sugar producing.
Is there anything that connected that would maybe be able to help loss of sight at all, like glaucoma or anything like that?
Yeah, that's definitely coming from the diabetes, and you need to. That's high blood pressure, and the blood vessels behind the eyes are getting too much pressure in them.
Okay.
You can adjust They should check their ions, like check their potassium and sodium levels, and that balances the cranial pressure in both the eyes and the brain and the blood vessels. So you can reduce your blood pressure by making sure you're taking enough potassium, which would be in the form of bananas or even just having it checked, because they check potassium in a regular blood test usually, or you can ask for it. And the ratio of potassium to sodium determines the pressure in those areas, which can affect the blood pressure also. Changing the diet to get away from any kind of inflammation, but the omega-3s will help to reduce inflammation, which tends to reduce the blood pressure also. And it also reduces bad lipids. I don't know what his lipid level is like, but getting a better lipid profile can help with the blood pressure also. I don't know what their blood pressure is like, because that's an important thing to look at. But they definitely, for me, I was pre-diabetic, and I went on a paleo diet. For someone who's not huge into meat, it was an interesting diet to try, because it's basically, they call it like the caveman's diet. It's basically you cut out all grains, and I cut out eggs. Eggs are a little bit inflammatory, but you can't be off them for long term unless you're really doing carefully looking at your other proteins. But I even stayed off beans and legumes, so I was on literally meats and fish, lots of fish, because they've got some very high omega-3. I had vegetables, like literally, when I say lots of vegetables, I mean 8 to 12 servings a day. That's what I mean by enough to have a therapeutic effect. And you can include fruits, but try to keep the low sugar fruits, like berries, mostly berries.
Okay.
So in the morning, I would do a smoothie. I'd have berries, coconut water, and then put in half a banana. Avocados are huge. Those are good fats that help to adjust your fat ratios, so the good lipids.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor. So if you want, I've been taking a lot of supplements from InfoWars. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. But the man supports his show by selling his own herbs, and he has a doctor group. He has several other doctors that have worked with him, and I would ask you to go ahead and check him out. Check out, because he seems to strive to get the highest quality that is out there. I mean, whatever it takes, kind of, you know.
The two things I always look for on a supplement is, does it have two standards? There's NSF, which is National Science Foundation, and GMP, which is Good Manufacturing Practice. They're the same standards that the drug companies have to use. It means that they've been tested for the quality of the ingredients, the purity, and the potency, and the bioavailability. Usually that means how easily it's absorbed into your system. A lot of people are just pooping out there. Well,
because of the way this guy's show is very controversial.
Oh, it is?
He brings up all the truths out that I'm bringing up out here. So they go after him quite a bit to try to get him off the air. And so they've attacked his supplements constantly to try to poke a hole in them. And they always turn out, even with these enemies' testings, to be of the highest standards.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so he goes beyond California standards and all the others. So as a nutritionist, I recommend maybe you go by, check out the Food Babe, and check out InfoWars and their supplements, and email me, let me know what you think.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I got your email.
Yes. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your conversation.
You too. Bye.